Talia felt the force ebb and flow within her. It wove from the sole of her feet to the tip of her tentacle-like hair and caused the strands to float around her head. When she was younger, she might have described the feeling as peaceful, but now she learned it was anything but. Life was never peaceful. It grows, it changes, it hurts, and it strives, but never does it rest. Only death was truly peaceful. Talia grasped her lightsaber and closed her eyes for just a moment. She felt her heart pound in her skull, the butterflies as they proliferated in her stomach, and the itch of muscles tense for action. Once again, she was face to face with death, and she was restless. Yet if for no other reason, she knew she was alive. Her eyes snapped open, and with its characteristic hum, a pure white lightsaber ignited before her. Talia risked a glance and couldn't help but smile as she took in the team beside her. For the sake of the Republic and her compatriots. No, not just her compatriots, her friends. She could not rest today. The old Republic assassin droid on her left lowered his multi-Gatling gun assembly. Statement! Your firepower is trivial when compared to ours. This Jedi on my right. As the droid gestured to his right, the blue-robed Eshka suddenly vanished, leaving behind only a vestige of swirling dust. The droid froze for a moment, and its ocular sensors zoomed in and then back out. Then, after another moment, he pivoted, unfazed. This Jedi on my left is General Talia. She is responsible for the elimination of Project Genesis. Further, we also have 4 ARC troopers, Jedi Master Deba, and my own enhanced weaponry. By my calculations, your odds of victory are less than 3%. My tactical recommendation? The Gatling guns affixed to the droid's body began to spin. Surrender. As the droid's weaponry activated, one of the gang members raised his pistol and his eye patch glows a dull orange. The engine roared to life inside the hulking cyborg of a Gamorrean beside him, and the beast turned its lifeless eyes on the droid. Talia got into a fighting stance. Last chance, she called out. In all my 3 years fighting beside HK, I've never seen his tactical predictions be wrong. The boss took a deep pull from his cigar and breathed out a puff of smoke toward the velvet-clad floor of the opera house. It's a shame I'll have to stain this carpet. He looked up with a sneer. With your blood. Talia knew the time for negotiations had come to a close. She summoned the Force and launched herself forward. The fighting raged all over the opera house. High above in one of the viewing stands, Stalwart, the Eshka Jedi, flung a sniper droid to the floor below. HK-47 turned a hailstorm of fire upon the Gamorrean, while Castle and his fellow clones aided Master Deba in holding back the boss's forces. Amongst it all, Talia was a whirlwind of piercing white light, carving a path for the enemy. She sliced the Gamorrean, and the flesh sizzled as his arm fell limp to the floor. Unfazed, it lashed out with its remaining muscular hand and tried to crush her, but she maneuvered away just in time. She risked a glance over the battlefield and witnessed the Republic forces quickly overwhelming the boss's minions. Just a moment more and we'll have them, she thought to herself, deflecting a blaster shot from a Mandalorian as he jetpacked away to engage the Eshka in the stands. Another victory for... Her thought was cut short, as a disturbance in the Force rocked her body. She stumbled and caught herself on one knee. The world around her began to spin. What? Searing pain erupted from her shoulder as a plasma bolt hit her. A wave of darkness fled over her with such power she could hardly feel the pain. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Stalwart's voice entered her mind. Talia, do you feel that? Talia scrambled to her feet once again, and barely managed to deflect a second shot. She rolled to the side and began to stumble up the stairs. It felt like she couldn't breathe. She had never felt the dark side like this before. The clones. It wasn't so much a thought as a feeling. Something had changed. As she risked a glance over her shoulder at Castle, she saw HK turn his fire upon her. Her instincts were swift and her lightsaber a blur, but she could only deflect so much. Everything burned. Talia! Stalwart's telepathic voice was frantic. HK-47, her former ally, continued to bear down upon her as he slowly traversed the steps. He called out above the gunfire. In accordance with Order 66, all criminals aiding the elimination of the Jedi threat will be given full amnesty for past crimes. Order 66? Jedi threat? Talia could barely keep her thoughts straight as she frantically parried. HK, what are you doing? A bolt got through her defense and she cried out in pain. She looked to Castle and witnessed him frozen in place, trembling. She radioed in on the comms as she kept away from HK's line of blaster fire. Castle, what's going on? After a moment, his faltering voice reached her. Talia, Static. Castle? She knocked the plasma beam aside. Castle! She watched in horror as the clone raised his pistol to Master Deba's unexpecting back. Castle, stop! Her scream reverberated throughout the hall as the clone fired, and Master Deba fell lifeless to the ground. Talia felt Stalwart reach out with the Force, and she took his hand. Suddenly, she was launched toward his balcony perch. What's happening? Why would Castle shoot Master Deba? What is Order 66? 1,000 questions muddled her mind as she tumbled onto the balcony. Stalwart finished affixing the defeated Mandalorian's jetpack to his back. He pulled Talia to her feet. "Talia, we have to go." Blaster fire tore into the balcony, and Stalwart ducked into a crouch. "We need to get back to the ship. Come on." Talia hesitated. "But what about Cat?" "I think the Sith had done something to the clones. That isn't Castle down there. Not right now." Talia hesitated, a blank stare on her face. "We need to get to the ship," Stalwart repeated, flinching as a nearby blaster bolt seared his skin. "We can't help Castle if we're dead." The last line seemed to resonate, and Talia nodded, slowly at first, but then more rigorously. "All right," she stated, and she climbed atop the jetpack. Stalwart waited for an opening in the blaster fire, and with a grunt, leapt from the balcony. The jetpack wavered under the added weight, but it stayed aloft, and they raced down toward the docks. Castle didn't hesitate a second time. He raised his pistol, lined up a shot, and fired. The blue beam sped through the air, and by the time the Eshka noticed it, it was too late. The blaster bolt buried itself into the Jedi's eye, and it was all Talia could do to hold on as he began to tumble from the sky. She prepared to catch them with the force, but the Eshka steadied himself just in time. "Stalwart!" "I'm all right," he groaned, but Talia could feel the life force beginning to leave him. She reached out and began to heal him, but he stopped her. "There's no time." Stalwart steered the jetpack toward the ship, and Talia saw Castle and his crew racing to make it there first. "I'll be right behind you," he whispered, and then with all the strength he could summon, he catapulted Talia forward. Suddenly Talia was falling toward the docks, and falling fast. She did what she could to slow the fall, but she hit the ground hard nonetheless. She felt something crack, but didn't waste time to figure out what. She staggered to her feet and hobbled inside the cruiser. Wiz looked up from his space chess game. "Oh my goodness, Talia! What happened? Are you alright? Where's—" Talia's voice was calm, commanding, and desperate. "Wiz, we need to ready the ship. We're leaving now." Wiz hesitated, his jaw working for a moment, as if to ask more questions, but with another look at Talia's expression, he decided against it. He ran to the cockpit, and Talia limped back to the ship's door. She scanned the skies for Stalwart and managed to spot him amongst Coruscant's bustling city skyline. Her gaze darted from him to the clones and then back to him. She judged their distance and speed, and a moment of relief washed over her. He's going to make it, she thought. Then, like a giant blade cutting through the sky, a line of rapid blaster fire slammed into the airborne Eshka as HK unleashed his full might on his former ally. Talia gasped as the Jedi's trajectory wavered. Stalwart's faint voice sounded in her mind. "Sorry, Talia. Looks like this next journey you'll have to do without me." "No, Stalwart, you're almost here. You can—" She stopped as she witnessed the Eshka's body go limp and the jetpack fall from the sky. She couldn't feel his life force. "Not you too," she whispered as she slumped against the doorframe. An orange flash and the faint sound of an explosion. Stalwart was gone. Talia stared into the distance. A blaster bolt hit the ship not 2 feet from her head. Her lazy gaze shifted and she saw Castle racing toward the ship, firing frantically. She heard the ship's engines hum, and the door between her and Castle began to close. The next shot was just inches away from her head, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Talia's gaze was enraptured by the clone running toward her like he had so many times before. But this time, it was to kill her. The heat from the next blaster bolt flamed blisters on her cheek, and all of a sudden, Talia realized she was tired. She had always been tired. Maybe it's time to rest, she thought. A tear began to well in her eye as she stared on the barrel of her best friend's gun. But then, just like that, the door shut, and Castle was stolen from her view. On the other side, she heard the sizzle of molten metal. The shot was just a second too late. She felt the ship accelerate into the sky, and Talia was pulled to the ground. She didn't try to get up. She didn't have the strength. Tears began to flow, and Talia felt something within her crack, fracture, and then burst. She sobbed. And if for no other reason than her tears, she knew she was alive. And there you have it, the end of an era, and yet another D&D campaign coming to a close. Honestly, that's one really cool thing about having played so many D&D games with Neo and the friend group. Because looking back, they're like so many different stories we lived through together. I mean, albeit imaginary ones, but we've have numerous lives we've lived. It's pretty fun to think about. So yeah, Star Wars campaign that John ran lasted ages, and that was in good part due to the infrequency of sessions and also my waning interest because I got cancer and my priorities mega shifted, so D&D was no longer quite as important. But yeah, it was high time for it to end. Yet nevertheless, it finished with a bang. Well done, ending. The morning after finishing the previous live demo, I attended my singing class, in which it's going to be a certainly interesting experience as far as experiences go. Like, we literally just sang in class, which is such a shift from my normal experience of school. The professor of that class is definitely interesting, a character, but man, can he sing. Anyway, he let us out a bit early, which worked out really well because I'd accidentally scheduled myself, so I would have to bike home and get on a Zoom call in 10 minutes, which is stretching the limits of even my TE efficiency. So yeah, got home and got on a call with Dr. Mallory, who is yet another curmudgeonly whack doctor. He's telling me I need to take testosterone injections to be a healthy human, despite the fact that my testosterone is already quite high on the modern reference ratings, because he argues that it used to be around like 2,000 units, I forgot, per volume. I don't remember, in the World War II era, and now it averages 600 units, I forgot, per volume, that I don't remember. And, like, if that's true, then fair enough. You know, that would make sense as a problem. But, see, my thought is, why has the male population suddenly, like, dropped in the amount of testosterone? And how can we fix that instead of just fixing the testosterone? So I was like, about getting his injection plan, and he got all, like, salty. And then, when he learned I was taking a atorvastatin and had an LDL of 23, he was almost livid and got even kind of childish, where he was like, well, if you're not going to get off a atorvastatin, then why would I bother telling you anything at all? You're not going to listen. He doesn't actually have that accent. I just made it up. And of course, I didn't say this out loud, but in my head I was like, because I paid you $150 for this hour appointment, which you were 15 minutes late to, by the way. I'm not paying you $200 an hour for you to be like, well, if you won't listen to me on this, then I won't talk to you. Humph. Or as Grace says it, Humph. Anyway, it was the thing. Once I finished that death, I ate food and talked with Katie, Emerson, and Grace before we did dance class, which was plie. And then I read things, ate food, round 2, as Mom, Dad, and I watched a movie, which was pretty good, though a bit crude. Once that was done, I did an infrared sauna, wherein I talked with Dad to pass the time. I then worked out and started listening to Jake from Disney Last Live Demo before going to bed. The next morning, I attended classes, did Funime, and then Grace, Adelaide, Katie, and I went thrift store shopping, wherein I expanded my wardrobe through their aid, and I spent like $100. Then, once they were burnt out on that, I played some racquetball with benj, which was a bit fun, and we accidentally crashed the children's center during some old guys' like weekly racquetball games, so the courts were all taken, but we'd already paid for a day pass, so we were like, what the heck, and we just joined them. Old guys, man. Who'd have thunk? They have skills. Despite the fact that they only like waddle, and they move so slow, they just have such precision with their ball placement that they actually just destroyed us. I mean, it's not like we had no chance. Like, Benj and I both agree if we practiced, we could probably get to their level in short order, but nevertheless, the difference was stark in skill. Eventually, the evening games wound down, and a court opened up, so Benj and I played some games against each other, and that was fun. And then, once we were thoroughly exhausted, we went home. I did Fume upon getting home, and then Benj, Adelaide, Grace, Katie, and I all donned the appropriate dog leashes, found the appropriate scooter, and began an electric scooter-powered rollerblading venture into the night. However, the trouble was, Adelaide and Katie were not the most proficient at their given modes of locomotion. I didn't think you could be bad at riding a scooter, but Katie kind of was, and Adelaide was on blades. She crashed like 5 times over the trip. And they were pretty non-trivial crashes at higher speeds, but she kept getting back up, and I'm not sure whether I'm impressed or concerned by that behavior. Like, she got pretty scraped up, and it seemed on the border of foolhardy. So on one hand, it seems plausible to me that she just kept persevering because she didn't want to look weak or inconvenience people. But on the other hand, I could totally see her motivation being she wanted to gain skill and mastery, and was just, had a fighting spirit and didn't give up easily. So if it's the latter, I am impressed, and if it's the former, I am concerned. Though, let's be honest, it was probably a mix of the two, because when does anyone ever have one motivation? Look at that FI sophistication. Regardless, I made the executive decision to make her own call, whether she quit or not, despite Grace's strong protest to the contrary. But I also made it abundantly clear there was no pressure either way. I respected T.I. Dom's ability to judge their own skills and limits. And besides, there's no easier way to make them mad than to tell them what they can and cannot do. So I didn't. Honestly, it was a great time though. We stopped at Ben's house, and I got one picture there. Also, Adelaide got so much better Adelaide bladed, and Katie got better at scootering too. And I really enjoyed the night overall. It was excellent. Also, here's a picture Grace took of us. And also a picture Mom took of us before we left. The next day, I had class. I did some 3D printing stuff. I've now got 3D printing deck boxes for all of my 33 Magic decks. I finished reading the second Spiral Dynamics book by Beck and attended singing class and then did Funime at home. My anime stats are pretty impressive, or disturbing, depending upon your point of view, at this point in time. I've watched a lot of anime. Currently, I'm at 66.5 days of anime. That's pretty crazy. I've spent 67 days of my life watching anime. I mean, almost always while doing other things, such as eating or suffering from chemo. But still, I don't know exactly how to feel about that. Anyway, I did Funime and attended added another hour to that total. I then attended dance class, which is such a whack experience. The fact that this is a college class, and even more than that I'm willingly participating in that class, baffles me every Tuesday and Thursday. After dance, I then worked out and hit a local PR for my 5K times. I ran a 5K in 21 minutes and 55 seconds, which is the fastest I've run a 5K in like 5 years. Plus, the treadmill settings was on hills too, 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, so non-trivial hills at that. Thus, I probably would have done, objectively PR'd if it had not been the case I was on hills. Given my fastest 5K ever was 21:30, which, yes, I know is kind of sad, but lol, who cares? I'll get a sub-20 time in here sometime. Watch me. Anyway, getting that time was great, and it felt fantastic externally and garbage internally. Definitely felt like I want to throw up a bit. And then I went home. I then took a bit of time to recover and ate duff food. After that, I went over to Neo and Steve's place, which is now new place actually, which is pretty close still, 10 minutes away, and played some Magic games with them. On the way back, I had some revelations about an eye, and having an auxiliary is probably why I'm weirdly good at counseling. which, with that realization resting upon me, I rested. The next day was the usual classwork, homework, eating to food. From there, I did some slightly atypical things. I went to UC Health to get my port flushed. Every time I go back there, my desire not to ever do chemo ever again is greatly reinforced. Once I got home, I did an infrared sauna, did some homework, danced with my heart, except, I think I got worse this time around. I don't know how that happens, but it's true. I guess not swing dancing for months will do that to you. Regardless, that particular dance night was more meh as far as dancing goes. However, Katie, Adley, and Rowan did show up, so that made it better. Also, afterward, I got to stare into the soul of Elijah, which made the night more worth it holistically. Once I got back from swing dancing, I did Funimate, went on a walk, and listened to Personality Hacker, and then slept. Saturday, I began listening to Personality Hacker and Pillbox Building, which always takes ages. I then did Funimate, read some, worked out, talked with my parents about the food relative to cancer things, briefly attended Ben's party, but lol, I didn't actually know what was happening until I had already made plans with Alan and his wife, Jess. And given they have kids and maybe a meal, I couldn't just reschedule. Hence, after briefly stopping at Ben's birthday, well, I don't know if it was his birthday party, yeah, and doing nothing of note, I then drove to distant land of Longmont while listening to my most beautiful instrumental playlist and enjoying the gorgeous day from my car window. I took the back roads, and it was actually such a nice drive. I really wish I could have shared that experience with someone. Upon getting there, the Filer's house was somewhat hectic. As Alan and Jess now have 3 kids, which is actually crazy, because I remember when the first of them hadn't yet existed externally. And so it was kind of hard to carve out space, but I performed my designated task nonetheless. See, while Alan had invited me over to catch up, and all that jazz, that was not his only purpose, as it was also the case that Jess was having quite a tense relationship with his mother, and thus the secondary in purpose for me being summoned was to use my counseling wizardry to do what I could to remedy the situation. Fortunately, Jess is an INFP, and the tension was with an ENTJ, so I understood the dynamics quite well, and I was pretty darn successful. At the end of it all, Jess was like, you could totally charge for this, to which I was like, you know what? Now that you mention it, fair point. So, lol, if any of you have relationship stuff, and you want to pay me to help fix it, then I am down. I think that, helping people through relational struggles would honestly be such a fulfilling gig. Not sure how to make that happen, or what I'd charge, but the idea sounds super cool. So if anyone want to hire me, or if you know someone that would like to hire me, I hereby shamelessly advertise my relational mending services, and we can figure out a fair price. Alright, advertisement over. After that successful venture, and getting to eat some pretty well-prepared spring rolls, I then talked to Alan about his potential side hustle of becoming an expert at sexing. That's a modified Red and Link side reference for those of you that failed to catch it. And yeah, actually though, Alan is like a sex god because he's an ISTP, and he decided this was an area he wanted to achieve TI mastery, and so lol, he did. I don't really care to expound in the depths of what that means. I know so much more things after this conversation. But lol, if your sex life sucks, then here's my shameless plug for Alan's instructional services. Alan, a sexpert. So yeah, that was certainly an interesting conversation, although not how I expect my evening to go. And yeah, we talked until 10 or so, and then because I'm lame and I need sleep, I then began my journey home. I got super cheap gas from Buc-ee's on that trip, and I also happened to see Emerson driving home, which was great. We raced, and I lost. Darn new cars. And then yeah, I did some Funimate, did some pill taking, and then I went to sleep. The next day was a church day, and thus I attended church and had a great walk with Jake, as is always the case, and thereafter I attended some classic socializing before driving Sydney back to her house because it was on the way, and Neo needed to take their car. After I dropped her off and got myself home, I then did Funimate before attending the last Star Wars D&D session, detailed above, and that was big good. After that, Ben decided he wanted to do a family movie night, so we did that, plus benj, because Lily's kind of like an honorary treat at this point in time. I feel like benj and I just cross-family pollinated. I'm an honorary Myers, he's an honorary treat. Anyway, that was a good movie, and Dad found me these free-dressed pineapples that was fire, so, it's like I got to have dessert for the first time, which made it really better. After that, we did a brief night walk before I drove benj home, and I listened to Personality Hacker on the way back, and folded my clothes before going to sleep. Monday, the cycle began anew. Classwork, homework, food, and mostly write this live email. Because the intro took ages, and creative writing is slow. And then I technically worked down the gym, but it was quite busy, so I only did a barely workout before I decided it wasn't really worth it, and because I had to wait in line for the machines. I then drove Joe's, ate the food, and then Jared assumed his place as our new DM, and we all worked on character creation. Not exactly sure how this is going to be, honestly. He's an INFJ, so he's got the world building in him, but when he had us build our character, it totally felt like he was winging it, and doing so inconsistently at that. Hence, I'm a bit skeptical regarding his DM abilities. But, lol, I'm glad to not be the forever DM, so just to get a chance to play with the people I care about is good enough. And so even if Jared turns out to be a so-so DM, I'm glad to have him. Once we wrapped that up, my character creation was done. I then did an infrared sauna at home while talking to Grace, and then sent some stuff to Hope over Discord and took a long rest. The following morning, I attended class, and also joined in my CSU advisor call where she was like, small talk? And I was like, haha, how about no? And she eventually got the message I did not want a small talk, and I got out of the appointment. I then attempted to 3D print things, did singing practice before going to do Funime. And then I talked to the bro for a bit before reading some and then doing dance class. This was the first dance class that I felt actually pretty comfortable. Like, I didn't really feel like I was out of place or like I was struggling the whole time. I just felt relaxed and like I was starting to get the hang of it. Once I got back from that, I worked on cleaning my headlights because Jesse Meyer showed me this like headlight deoxidizer, and man, was it super effective. I should have taken a before and after picture, but whatever. I'll find an old picture of my car that'll work. Okay, now look at the Phoenix's opaque, nay, jaded jaundiced eyes, though of course otherwise immaculate and illustrious veneer. Ta-da, which you can't see. See those headlights? They're lachrymose beyond measure, but behold and gaze upon them now. Also, ta-da, what beauty, what ineffable clarity. Oh, great is the Jesse recommended deoxidizer, and greater still the headlight it has cleansed. Once I finished that process of greatness, I then did FooTube, or whatever name Jake so christens it, before proceeding to play racquetball with Benj, which was great, except he destroyed me, and I had no wrong racket to blame all this time. I'll confess he fairly trounced me, but there will be next time. After we chilled in the hot tub at the Range Free Athletic Center, as it turns out they have a racquetball court, which is so much closer than Children's Center, and that was really nice. It's just a nice facility in general. Once we got home, Grace and Benj watched Nichijou, while I shopped for D&D dice, officially giving up hope that my old dice I'd had for 5 years would be found. And I settled upon a pretty cool set. It's metal, and it looks epic. I also bought some resin sets for cheap, so that I would have dice for Magic, because that's always a problem. So yeah, I did that, and then watched some Nichijou episodes with them, and slept. The next day I had class, ate food, read my cancer book, did Funime, read my book some more, caught up, and called Molly Miller, which was the big good, until I arrived at Joe's, and he and Karina came on our shopping trip to complete my Hotness transformation part 2, aka they helped me find the remaining clothes I would need to have a complete wardrobe. And honestly, the trip was super successful, and I think I now have all I need to be officially fashionable. Speaking of which, I have a rant to thrust upon you. Humans are shallow. Full stop. Prepare yourself for my demonstration of this fact. Okay, so in what aspect are humans shallow, you may ask? Well, into the degree to which they judge you based on your appearance. Let's play a little game of compare and contrast, shall we? Before Hotness Transformation Part 2, women generally ignore my existence. Men wouldn't keep up a conversation even if I engaged them. Both genders would not make eye contact with me in hallways. They would look down at their phones while passing me and would not easily let me enter the flow of pedestrian traffic. And then 7,000 other things that I thought were normal before I got hotter. I'm sure there's much more I could say in this category, but since I've lived my whole life in the not hotness category, my discriminatory treatment is not made aware to me until now via comparison to my current treatment. Hence, I'll just highlight the new ways in which I'm treated and that you can infer how I used to be treated. After Hotness Part 2 transformation, women generally acknowledge my existence. The difference in this category is stark. Probably the most stark of all the changes. The amount of eye contact that I experience from females is so much higher, night and day. Don't get me wrong, I still pass women in the halls that don't give me a glance, but that's so much rarer now. Second, I've had numerous times where females I'm proximate to will initiate unprompted conversations. Things like commenting on class or asking the most irrelevant question like, did you watch the homework videos? This never happened to me before. Also, I'm 98% sure one of my dance instructors, who ironically is probably younger than me because it's a 100 level class, has a crush on me, as well as the girl I sit next to in one of my classes. The point is, evidently some women think I'm attractive, and this is almost entirely a new experience. Well, except for that one case where Leanne in my engineering class, liked me, but I have no idea why she liked me. 2, guys acknowledge me. The amount of eye contact received from guys in the halls is actually approximately the same. But, they don't really seem to have camera to look. But when I sit down next to them and strike up a conversation, the reaction is entirely different. When before they would glance over at me and then pull out their phone, giving a few, curt words of response. Now that I, receive their full attention and they engage me. In fact, I've even had a guy almost, macho off against me where we conversed and I, talked about how I like sports, right? Because I like sports. And he tried to show he was, as athletic to me. And he just happened to mention all the times he went to the gym. Also, in general, guys are just more receptive to me and eager to make my acquaintance. And then 3, people just treat me better in general. Space is made for me to enter the flow of traffic when I'm leaving class or passing through a doorway. People will hold the door for me more often. People pay more attention to me when I, talk or more highly regard my opinion. People are more likely to respond to my calls to action. If I'm trying to get a bunch of people to talk on Zoom, they're more likely to say yes. They're more likely to give me grace when I mess up. They're like, no, you did great when I fail. When before they would just not say anything. All kinds of stuff like this. It's actually ridiculous, the changes. And okay, fine, I grant it's a really big transformation in quite a short amount of time. I've lost 35 pounds, put on muscle, have hair on my face, and eyebrows. Oh, God bless eyebrows. And my hair has come back curly, which apparently is a big deal in terms of attractiveness, or so the females tell me. It went from this, cancer me, to this, non-cancer me. Also, I realized making this comparison, I have, no pictures of myself. I never take pictures of myself. So this is the best comparison I can do. Also the first selfie I've taken in, 6 months. And, I know this is a side tangent, but I hope my Hotness transformation proves to you all what an ENTJ can do when they set their mind to it. Don't underestimate dominant TE with an NI flair. Given how differently people treat me, I know I've succeeded. And we ain't even done yet, but flaunting my ability to do what I say I'll do aside, and focusing back on the issue at hand, it genuinely shocks me how shallow everyone is. I went from being treated like I was invisible and insignificant to being seen and treated like I was important. And that's just sad. My characters remain the same. Well, approximately. I've grown some for sure. But the point is, my character growth doesn't account for the difference. It's literally just how I look that has changed. And yet, it's like I'm a completely different person to everybody. Well, okay, that's not quite true. Most of you treat me about the same. I'm not saying, my friends are unaffected. I definitely know some shifts with the people I'm close to, too. But still, for the most part, you all value me like you always have. And honestly, I find that deeply comforting. Call it inferior if but the fact that people still value me and cared about me when I was mega fatter and, dressed however I thought was most convenient and had a Thomas Aquinas haircut, I regret nothing, makes me deeply happy. There are a lot of people in my life that do genuinely care about me because of my character. And while sure, maybe they like me more if I'm hot, I'm still Alex to them either way. And that's a very nice thought. Especially, couched across the backdrop of a surprisingly shallow college campus. Anyway, there's that tangent. I'll probably do a for realsies before and after photo sesh once my hotness transformation is complete. Before that, this is where I am at and what I'm experiencing. All to say, Karina, Joe, and I went shopping for an age. I bought all the clothes, and then Joe and Karina also found a few things for themselves. And then I got home, did Funime, did brief walk for CSU with benj, and Joe, in which I showed them the 3D printing room in the engineering building, which they were duly impressed by. And then once we got back, I went on a lengthy night drive with Joe, in which we had great conversation, like the days of law. And then once we got back from that, I went to sleep. The next morning, I attended class, got my blood drawn, discovered I am mostly healthy, except for the fact that I was dangerously close to overdosing on vitamin D, so I'm scaling that back. I then got more 3D printing done, attended song class, did anime and food, read my book, danced, and then did an infrared sauna, and then something original happened because the biannual weeb competition came around. Hence, as is tradition, Liam and I attended and guessed as many anime openings as we could. However, unlike last time, we were thoroughly crushed. Now, this may have been in part to the fact that entire tables were sharing their answers with each other, and the odds that someone does not know an intro across 8 dedicated weebs at a table is basically 0. But we placed 12th out of our 35 teams or so that were playing. So we did objectively good, but not even close to our standings last semester. But still, it was a good time, and I got another cheap anime banner, though this time from Oshinoko, and I put it up next to my Tsukasa banner. Upon getting back, I then did some small trivia stuff before going to the gym to work out, and then because all my new clothes had been washed at this point, I remodeled my wardrobe, which was actually kind of fun, I'm not gonna lie. Before then going to do a bit more small things and heading to bed. Friday I had class and work, and for the first hour of that work, I talked with my coworker, Ellie, yet another marker of attractive success, as she was not interested in a conversation before this point, but now I make the cut. Stupid shallow humans. I then ate food and did school before spending the rest of the remainder during work responding to Joel Bartram in his annual Life of Day email. That man, as always, is such a lad. I then left work a touch early to go to the chiropractor's, got chiropracted, and then went over to the Myers, where I played table tennis with me boy Benj, before I then journeyed back to my house, did FoodTube, and then Benj rejoined me as we carpooled over the Schwers, where Grace was doxing. While there, Adelie and Katie joined us, though Adelie not as long as Katie. I got stuff done for cancer. Benj played me in 6 games of pool, which I lost all of them, and Katie grew up my leg hair. I think she's taking her honorary position as my CSU assigned spouse a little too seriously. Oh, actually, I think that's been voided, so that's a rip. I tried to get Grace in as my daughter just the other day, and the guy said he couldn't find her, so who knows? Maybe the OG dude never put the girls down as my family in the first place, which would actually be tragic, because that was just, such a good bit. Anyway, it was a good night. I had a decent conversation with Katie, and I enjoyed the pool games with Ben, and, I lost 2 of those games by sinking the 8 ball at the same time as I scratched, so that was immensely vexing. And then it wrapped up. Benj and I journeyed back home, and I bought some trendy sunglasses and belts before sleeping. Saturday, I got to sleep in, which was very nice. I built the upcoming week's pillboxes while learning things, ate food, did the communication with people, read some things for my cancer book. At this point, I've obtained I've obtained the $100 worth of sugarless peanut butter chocolate peanut butter cups that I ordered. And those have been actually keeping me going. Peanut butter cups with green tea, especially when you can't have sugar and they taste actually good, is fire. That is the life. I then went on a run and had a good time, but I felt sick, probably because Lloyd ate 6 peanut butter cups and drank 3 cups of green tea right before running. After that, I journeyed to the Jameses, where Johanna was doxing for them because they were absent, and I went to a night walk with her, and that was a really good conversation, which I quite enjoyed. Then, to my surprise, though not necessarily disappointment, Benj, Grace, and Ben, and then David showed up, and I joined all of them, save Grace, who stayed back to take a shower of all things, on a night walk, round 2, but it was decent. The trouble is that Ben has finally unlocked his existential philosophy gene, but his thoughts are all old news to me and kind of low level. Hence, he wants to have conversations that before I would have been riveted by, but now I just see as simplistic and boring. Which honestly is quite sad, because if he had been all existential with me 5 years ago, we would have been the best of existential buddies. Anyway, so he took the conversation in that direction for a while, and I mostly listened. And then, I had a largely circular conversation with David about what he looks for in a friend, and basically learned that the reason he wants to be friends with me is he wants to slurp what I do well. and thinks I'm weird enough to be worth it. And I'm like, lol, I can respect said motivation. It's a very TE motivation. But I don't think he's prepared for my TE Dom energy. Like, I'm a bit concerned that we're going to have like an immovable object versus an unstoppable force scenario here. I'm not sure he's ready to be friends with another TE Dom. And, you know, a TE Dom such as I, for that matter. But we'll see. It's so rare to find people that pursue friendship with me, like I almost always do with others, that, you know, I'm not going to be like, yeah, no, because I appreciate being pursued in that way. Even though I don't really foresee David and I having, like, the best of friendship. But yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll come to really enjoy each other and become great friends. Who's to say? So, the TRDL, we yapped. Once that elapsed, I then headed home and slept. The morning turned out to be of the Sunday variety, hence the typical church duties applied. The conversation with Jake was de bueno, and I did the socializing. Adelie and Cannon both arrived for the first time, so that altered the vibe. But I had a good conversation with Nessa, so that worked out. I then went home for eating food and watching YouTube, before then journeying to the Wade's ranch for the first time. And it was okay. I don't really like the dusty, rusty, my house is musty ranch vibe, 3 out of 10, but it was a nice house. However, I did get to ride a horse for the first time, so that of course made the whole experience worth it. Horses are very large, and also far more intimidating than anticipated. But, nevertheless, I wielded them excellently, and I would say I did the best at getting the hang of commanding the beast. What can I say? I have a talent for controlling things. Here's a picture of me and said horse, also Grace. And more horse. After that, we had a conversation with on the Wade's patio. That was tight focused, but also boring. I'm kind of getting to the point where typing people is more like a chore than a privilege, which is perhaps a tad unfortunate, but it's where I'm at. Around 5 or so in the evening, the Treat family then traveled home and then while at said establishment, I ate food, watched YouTube, and then once I concluded and Benj arrived, Benj, Annie, Grace, and I all carpooled back to Wade's ranch, where we had a lackluster get-together. That wasn't a total bust, but also wasn't great. But yeah, we stayed there until about midnight, and then head home and got to sleep. The next day, I did some organization of my magic stuff. I started a new anime, which was big epic. I ate the food while watching that anime. I then played a few magic games and caught up with John, and then began mass communication, because Benj pressured me into organizing something. But lol, I was grateful for his pressuring retroactively. Hence, after like 2 hours of communication, and most people not being spontaneously available, a rollerblading group was assembled, consisting of Benj, me, Johanna, Sam, and Micah. Ironically, only Benj and I were on blades. And then Benj got like some weird back pain episode, so he utilized Micah's motorized bike for power, at least partially. Thus, I was the only one that like legit bladed the whole way. But that was like a remarkably easy task nevertheless, because I brought brand new blades and holy cow, they're so much better. Like night and day difference from my old blades. It took so little effort to go so far. Tangentially, my respect for Sam Trade's blading has gone down significantly, because while once I experienced the high qualityness of blades, it suddenly became quite clear how he could hit such high speeds for so long. And I also had a break for the first time. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. Where have breaks been my whole life? Anyway, I was lost in the bliss of having nice new blades for like the whole trip, and perhaps due to this, or perhaps due to the fact that it was just gorgeous as far as the night goes, we ended up going 29 miles. It was honestly so nice though, like really good trails, fantastic stars, just the perfect temperature, and yeah, here's a route we took. You have to understand, it wasn't supposed to be this long. The plan was a comfortable 15-mile blade, but once we got going like 9 miles in, someone, I don't know who, was like, we could visit Joe, which had me like, be like, oh yeah, I thought about that earlier, but I ruled it out because I thought everyone would be tired, but it turns out people weren't tired. So I was like, hey, since we're feeling fantastic and everyone seems to be good, I'm like, sure, let's do it. And hence we extended our trip, taking a brief respite at the house of the James before continuing on our way. That part, right after Joe's, was the one that really was rough because the trail was no trail. It was just a street. And that was a bit sketch, but everyone eventually got back on the actual trail, which was great. So yeah, 29 miles on blades with people I enjoy. That is a good way to spend an evening, for sure. The next day, it was back to the grind. I did class, 3D printed, did some little things, did my singing homework. Food May had a conversation with Mom and Dad where Dad stepped down from food making. His inferior SI finally got to him. And then Mom and I spent the next hour or so planning how to pick up his slack. And then I introduced her to Instacart, which is saving her so much time. I then went to dance class, got home and ate, as Johanna and I had a deep convo. I then hung out with Katie and Emerson for a brief time, and then proceeded to journal some, and slept. The next day, I schooled, 3D printed, did trivial stuff, played a bit of Magic with Braden, and then did a pseudo hot tub talk with him. I say pseudo because we both planned to chill in the hot tub, but the swimsuit Braden left in his locker last year and counted upon wearing was way too small for him now. He's bulked up a ton in the last year. And so we just ended up sitting clothed by me while I chilled in the hot tub. And it was a funny scenario, but I appreciate him sticking with me through it. It was also a very good conversation. Braden is definitely hitting 5 in Spiral Dynamics. He just like oozed orange in that combo. As soon as it ended, I sequestered myself in my room and called Katie, Ratio Katie, and we chatted and caught up for like an hour and a half. Honestly, Katie is a lass, the female equivalent of a lad, and I'm glad to know her. Granted, female INTJs are an acquired taste, but that taste to me is like Australians and Vegemite. Great combo. After that, I did Funime, had some great soup made by my esteemed mother, did an infrared sauna, worked out, talked with the other Katie, Grace's Katie, while responding to Joel Bartram's animal response to me. He's so funny in his emails. And then finally, I finished that night with a great conversation with my bro. Overall, quite the day. Thursday, I had class, tried to do 3D printing, but failed, did singing practice and then homework, came home and did Funime, only to reach the end of the dub of the third show I was watching. This is why we don't watch new shows, okay? Because waiting for the rest of the dub is actually so painful. Like, I keep switching to new shows, so I'd have something to watch in the meantime. But then as it happens, the third time I switched, I was like, oh, I should pivot to an old anime instead, so I don't have to keep switching to new shows, because the dub's not done. After Funime, I finished yet another cancer book. This is my 5th I finished so far. And so I picked the top book off my stack and started reading the next. You have no idea how much reading I've done and how much I've got to do. Like, I've literally spent just 200 bucks on cancer books. Like, I've got so much reading to do. But see, that's not sad, because if I'm reading, I'm also getting to drink green tea and eat dark chocolate. So it's worth it. Deciding I can only eat the good-tasting sugarless candy when productively reading was such a good call. Surprisingly motivated to be like, I want chocolate. Well, guess I've got to read now. After that, I attended a dance class, which I received the following unprompted quote from one of my female classmates as she biked past me. Bro, you look so majestic dancing. So majestic. Newscaster pulls the mic back to himself. You heard it here first, folks. Alex Treat, the majestic man, on display every Tuesday and Thursday at CSU's University of the Arts. Join us next time for Kittens. Who keeps strangling them and why? Hold up, I just realized this information could be extremely detrimental to me. If any of you came and watched me do effectively ballet dancing, I would actually die. I take it back. The majestical man is not on display, and this is not like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, come watch me scenario. I'm infinitely sincere. Like, just like I was about Violet Evergarden, the body pillow, but a joke here? No. And now I have to deal with Violet Evergarden being stuck to my wall and watching me fall asleep every night. She watches me every night. So yeah, don't come watch me, but apparently I'm majestic. Take it from girl whose name I forgot. Once I got home, I did Funime, read some, picked up Neo, and had an interesting sociologist conversation with him, and then him and Joe. Noah finally arrived, an hour late, mind you, and we talked about the future of Thursday nights, to which it was decided that the future would rest upon the shoulders of Neo's Isekai campaign, and then Noah left abruptly for sleep. On the way back, Neo and I had a more interesting conversation, and then it was night. Friday, I attended school, but I noticed that I was starting to feel sick, and I wasn't sure if this was, real sick, so I just, soldiered through. I then did class and went to work, which was uneventful. And then once I got off, I talked to this random INTJ dad found that's 50 or something for 3 hours. He definitely had tea, and he was smart, but just not smart enough. We played a game of chess and literally tied, and then debated something related to epistemic foundationalism, with him taking the position that all justified statements had to be justified via empirical experience, which I was like, okay, yeah, you can say that, and I might even be prone to thinking something along those lines, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are other philosophically tenable views, and besides, clearly you don't have to think clearly, if you did think that it had to be that way, then what experience, empirical experience, would tell you that only empirical experience is good enough justification? Answer, there is none. It'd be self-defeating. So yeah, he was intelligent and he listened at times, but the conversation was largely pointless and he didn't bring up anything new that I didn't already know. And he really just dogmatically insisted upon his empirical justification as the only kind of good justification axiom the whole time without sufficiently addressing my counter-arguments. However, he was a good debate, so I enjoyed getting to flex that muscle again. It's actually been ages since I got to debate. And our conversation was cordial, so it was good. I wish I could have, extracted myself from the scenario sooner, an hour and a half sooner. But, unfortunately, he was very into it, so he didn't easily allow for such extraction. Overall, my verdict was a good change of pace. Probably glad I did it, but not worth a round 2. And I told him as much. Plus, my voice hurt, because I was sick, and I talked too much given my condition. Once I got back home, I did Funime, went to CSU, worked out with Benj and Grace, and not only did that... Oh, and then while we were there, all of us did a 3-minute plank, which Grace was quite surprised with herself about that. Then Benj and I also got new max leg press values, and if you recall, we did those a while back at the Chilson Center, and I got a 540, though I think that that probably wasn't counting the weight of the machine itself, so that probably was a little bit higher. And Benj got a 720. However, it seems we've both improved since our last values, since our new values are as follows. Grace, 280. Me, 700. Benj, 800-ish. I don't remember his exact value. But yeah, we're doing pretty well, I would say. And here's a picture of Benj, that Benj got of me trying really hard. So yeah, good times. We all chilled in the hot tub, talked some. Grace taught Benj and I how to do mermaid kicks. And yep, I had fun. Once we got back, Benj and I started looking through his genetic test results, and I realized there was a 20% off Labor Day sale going on, because the test is $360. That's a big chunk of money. And it was ending in 15 minutes. Hence, we texted Nessa, who had previously expressed interest in the test, and we got her to buy it before the Labor Day sale ended. And then Johanna and Grace jumped on board too and bought it while it was on sale. And then pretty soon, Sydney will be getting it, as well as Karina, so it's a verifiable movement. If you want to join said movement, which I would highly recommend since this test can seriously help you avoid some like really rough diseases. Like if I had known about it ages ago, I probably wouldn't have had cancer because I would have known I had both defective variants of the mother genes and would have taken actions to help with the, radical oxygen species that are in my blood and would have done stuff to, improve my methylation, which probably would have kept me from getting the DNA damage that caused me to have cancer in the first place. Hence, I bestow upon you a link if you want to follow it. I don't get anything from this, by the way. The test is just super cool, and so I'm trying to spread it around. So yeah, that happened. It was good, and then I helped explain some of the things to Benj, because, I know a lot of health things now. But we cut that short before finishing, because it was late. The next day, I was very much sick, hence I woke up, built a pillbox while listening to Personality Hacker, did Funime, and then went back to sleep for like 4 hours. Thereafter, I woke up for round 2 of food. Nessa came over, we talked for 2 hours, which was good, and then went to bed mega early. I got like 12 hours of sleep or something like that, and I woke up feeling, bad enough that I would have usually skipped church, but Nessa was bringing her brothers, apparently a very rare occurrence, and demanded I attend. Plus, my friend Adelie was coming to church for the second time, and I didn't want to leave her hanging, so despite feeling blah, I went anyway. There was one really good moment in the service that I need to mention because at some point, Pastor Kevin said, "Last time I checked," and at that moment, Grace and I both looked at each other just like without, just at the same time, and we both whisper saying, "I'm still hot," which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Grace and I really do have such a fantastic relationship. Actually, pure beauty. Anyway, still hot moment aside, I got roped into typing Nessa's brothers, which I did, though not confident on one of my verdicts. One was definitely an STJ, but the other, maybe an ISTP? Not really sure. Regardless, I did that, and then I sought out Noah as a social security blanket because I didn't have the stamina to keep my usual high-energy conversations going, and hence I needed TI energy, and Adelie let me down because she couldn't think of a topic. But thankfully, Noah is never at a loss for a good topic to ramble about, and I was socially saved by his magnanimous nature and flowing guttural utterance. Once I got home from church, I did Funime and then slept for 3 hours. Thereafter, I read some of my cancer books until it was time to do Funime again. I then talked very briefly with Emerson before getting a call from the Ortho Bros Annalise recommended, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not really equipped to handle your questions, but I know a guy who is." Hence, he put me in touch with this guy named Aiden, and it turns out Aiden actually is the big smart. He is the 1 in a million Ortho Bro. That is the level of rigor I'm actually looking for. But I'll talk about that conversation later. For now, I finished my call with the lesser Ortho Bro and slept. Monday, I definitely still felt sick, but I was functional, so I attended school. I engaged in the standard routine and worked on this life email. Once I got home, I helped Mom drop off Ben's car at the mechanic before attending Monday night and the D&D session therein. And I have no comment upon that. I spent the next hour and a half having various conversations with various people, and then once I got out of that, got that out of my system, I then slept. Tuesday was fairly uneventful. School, chiropractor, being congested and sore throaty, doing homework, singing, and reading my cancer book, dancing my heart out, and then more cancer book. Oh, and I guess something abnormal did happen, namely that I hung out with Liam. I drove to his house after my second Funime of the day and helped him build his first magic deck. He caught on surprisingly quickly and did well, especially for his first deck. I just gave him a commander and whatever cards he wanted, plus 2 of my 3D printed deck boxes and some sleeves, because getting like a down payment of gear often makes one more eager to commit to the game. And yeah, after I helped him build that first deck, I gave him the commander for a second, which he later built, and I have seen that, and it's pretty good. Once I wrapped up, I got home, took a 15-minute break to just sit in the front yard and stare at the stars, because I needed a bit of inner tranquility, before going to sleep and time-skipping to the next day, and all the hecticness it would contain. Class, reading, Funime, all were performed in quick succession. Afterwards, I talked with Becky Dawson for a few hours, and I'm really thinking I feel like things are pretty dialed in at this point in time. She found this cancelator who she thinks is mega smart, so I'll be talking to her at some point here. But yeah, otherwise, not many changes to be made. Once I got home, I took a baby risk on paying for this AI that will turn your YouTube videos into shorts, and I proceeded to turn all my AMV videos into shorts, only to experience less YouTube success than I had with the long-form content itself. So that was a royal waste of 3 hours and $10. But hey, you gotta try those Hail Marys every once in a while. I then did Funime, did a brief rollerblading listening to Personality Hacker, came back, finished the shorts attempt, and then, because I felt antsy, decided I would get on Nightblade again. However, no one was free to join me in person. They were either said no, they were working, or it wasn't pragmatic. But Johanna did have time to call, so we talked for a bit of the part of the blade over the phone. Decent conversation. Definitely got better toward the end. And then once that ended, I just bladed the rest away in silence, because it was nice. It felt pretty good. I felt pretty good before I got out blading, but once I was on my way back, I was like, oh, I am definitely still sick. So I basically hobbled home because my body was dead. Nevertheless, here is the route I took. About 11 miles. It was really nice, though. So the blade was exhausting. I'm glad I did it, but it was nice. School, tests, some 3D printing, reading, Funime, more reading is what occupied most of my day. Yet, after it all elapsed, I had an eclectic summons to Alan's house wherein I was commanded to weed the yard. So I did. Thereafter, we all just kind of hung out and talked. They fed me, and I got talking to Jess about the relationship stuff, and it was decided that the filers would pay me to help them with that issue. Hence, I got my first life coaching gig. Whoop, whoop. However, because Liam was there, we didn't get into the relational weeds. I just kind of decide to expound upon some Jungian theory, as it would make my work easier later on. And yeah, I'm just absolutely stoked to get paid to do something like this for reals. Like, I spent the whole drive just in my dreaming about how epic it would be to like counsel people through relationship stuff as my career. Also, it was spontaneously decided that tomorrow, aka Friday, will be my first session because Alan and Jess like had that one day free, and it was the only day they had like childcare for the next month. Hence, once I got home, I spent like an hour and a half going through my notes and refreshing myself on the relevant data for their types and preparing myself for the next session. And I got to sleep around what? The next day was work, class, making progress on life and emails, as well as doing some homework. I then got a brief break at home before the time came for me to drive back to the Fido's house in Longmont and help them sort things out. And it was great. Fantastic conversation, and we made some really good progress on a number of fronts. According to Jess, I've solved 2 struggles that had plagued them for their entire marriage. And while I'm optimistic, I'm going to wait to see if things get implemented before I take that credit. But still, I do think we made fantastic progress. And I'm even more stoked because Jess said she's going to recommend me to some friends of hers that have had struggle in their marriage for decades, and normal counselors haven't been able to help them. That anti dream of becoming a counselor doesn't seem that far-fetched. I've been told, that I've done better than actual counselors on a number of occasions, so clearly I'm doing something right. So yeah, I need to figure out the legal stuff. I looked into that briefly, and it seems like as long as I classify myself as a life coach and make it clear to not substitute for professional counseling, then I can actually do this like legal business without too much red tape. So yeah, I'm pretty serious about this deal. Anyway, it was a good session. I got home, finished up my takeaway notes for Alan and Jess, and then it was time to rest. The next morning I arose and built advanced pill boxes, aka I bought a second set of pill boxes because I couldn't fit all my pills in the right days, the right times with just the one boxes because there's so many pills. And I have now combined the two and was finally able to optimize pill distribution throughout the day for maximal absorption and efficiency based on the individual characteristic of each substance I'm taking. So yeah, my pill boxes for the next week now look like this. I'm glad to finally be able to min-max that out because, I'd not been doing that for ages and that was bugging me quite a lot. Anyway, that achieved, I then did Funime, at the tail end of which Benj notified me he was spontaneously free, hence he arrived at my place and I finished eating and we went and spontaneously played racquetball over at Range Athletic Club. But the day pass cost us like $15 each, which was way too expensive. But it was still big fun. The first 3 games, he actually destroyed me, like my score was half of his, and I was like, okay, enough of this. And then I used my massive brain to see what he was doing and what was working, and then copy it. Then, from then on, I either won or I lost by 2 or 3 points only. So yeah, I tried, and I did better, and that was nice. I mean, I still lost overall. But the end win-lose ratio was like 2-5, so, at least I tried, and I was competitive when I tried. Because for a second there, Benj was just kind of kicking my butt. Anyway, we played until I was exhausted, then we chilled in the hot tub for a bit. Afterward, we were thinking we'd do something, but then I realized I didn't really have the time, so I instead organized volleyball for the next day. However, in the meantime, I did an infrared sauna while Benj helped me decide who to invite for volleyball, and also helped me map out this random volleyball court I'd seen from the road. After that happened, I then did Funime round 2 before calling it the aforementioned Aiden, and casually rollerblading around City Park as we talked for 3 hours about Orthodox stuff, and my problems therein. And it was by far one of the best intellectual conversations I've ever had. Like, it was really good. And I'm really glad I got to do it. I'm hoping we'll have more in the future, because this guy is a good thinker, and he has a lot of background knowledge about his faith. After that, I did some small things, and that was the night. And then finally, yesterday I attended church, walked with Jake, did some socializing at full house capacity. I mistook Lily something for Susanna, which was a big oof. Also, big oof, I don't actually remember her name. From there, the plan was Joe would carpool with me, and then I could hang out with him. But then Karina was like, "You're leaving me?" And puppy girl eyes. And so Joe and I were like, fine, you can come. And hence Karina joined Joe and I and the great, glorious Screeching Phoenix. Its best feature, mind you. And we journeyed to my house, where magic was played, food was eaten, and friendship enjoyed. Both Karina and Joe's friendship. From there, we went to the aforementioned volleyball court, only to discover it was quite nice in location, but not so nice in quality. In fact, it had both goat heads and sand in its sand, and glass in its sand. So we pivoted and went for rolling more. Thankfully, one of their courts was open, and so we got a game going, and it turned out there was the perfect number of people that showed up, as we got to have 2 full teams, 6-on-6, and it was a good time, though albeit a bit hot. Beth, Lily something, and the OG the bestedly just sat on the sidelines doing, I don't know what, but it looked boring. But hey, I was still glad to have them there. From there, I drove Joe and Karina back to Southgate, dropped them off, and I got home, did a bit of reading with tea and chocolate, only to discover Grace's girl gaggle was in my abode. Hence Emerson, since she's really busy, and I hardly got to see her. Oh, not really hence Emerson. Hence, since Emerson is so busy and I hardly get to see her, I decided, against my better tea productivity judgment, to join them and hang out instead. Well, I'm actually really glad I did, though, because, it was a really good conversation. We just, sat on a grassy knoll, watching volleyball games and football training, and we had probably the best conversation I've had with the two of them. It was very deep. So yeah, it turned out that was super worth it, and I'm very glad I went. And yep, I got home, folded clothes, and then I went to sleep. And so, yet another present reached and captured for a moment by my figurative pen. I will talk with you all next time.